after supper? Well, the big deal about after supper is that Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10, he said, this cup of blessing that we drink, is it not the communion cup? He said that in verse 16 of chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians. This is called the cup of blessing in the New Testament. It's the cup of redemption in the Old Testament. And it's the same cup. It's the cup after supper. Why the cup after supper? Because this is the cup that Jesus said, reading, if you abide in me, you will bear much fruit. Do you remember him saying that? And you remember when, now you do. It was immediately after the Seder he said that. And he's saying this to them. Before that, he said this, who creates fruit on the vine. When Jesus said this prayer, Jews have been saying this and still say it for thousands of years. He was literally telling them that they will become the fruit on the vine. Why? Because he creates fruit on the vine. He told them that they need to abide in him. Abide, I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me. That's where the fruit comes from. You abide in me, you will grow fruit. I will create fruit from you in your relationship to the vine, which is Jesus. And that's what he's telling them. They didn't get that. Who would? But they did get it afterwards, and that's why they included it in the Seder, in the communion table. So Jesus is about to become the seed that falls upon the ground, the one that was promised since the Garden of Eden, that his death will bear much fruit, and in and through them that fruit will remain. The cup of redemption that we drink is so much more than wine or grape juice. The communion cup that you drink represents the grace of God that Jesus' death purchased for us. That's how he bears fruit in us. Not only did he set us free from slavery of sin, but he died to give us a meaningful and effective life to battle sin and bring liberty to others. We become the blessing that Abraham was given and the light that goes off into the nations. So if you would read that next verse in 1 Corinthians 11. Thank you. And that's why we drink the cup of redemption. So we drink this cup now. I hope you don't think I'm sounding punishing, but it makes me sad that we've missed so much. So this leads us to one more thing. We have one more cup. What do we do with it? The fourth cup. Do you remember what the fourth cup is called? The cup of the kingdom. So in the Jewish home, the Seder would end at this point, drinking the next cup. However, we will not partake of it. And don't be sad. I will tell you now why. It's called the cup of the kingdom for a reason. You remember when we started the Seder, we said that from Exodus 6, verses 6 and 7, this is where the four cups come from, the names of them. The four I wills, which means they're God's promises. I will bring you out. I will take you from slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, which were his outstretched arms, and I will take you to be my people. So he's already done the first three. Did you ever wonder why Jesus said these final words at his Seder following the cup? The third cup. Somebody read that, the reader? I tell you, Matthew 26.
I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.
Did you hear that? What's this until that? What are you talking about, Jesus? Why won't you drink with us now? This is the fourth cup. We drink this cup. Well, no, and the reason is right. Why? We leave it on the table because we're supposed to do it in remembrance of him. We do it in faith, believing him that the fourth cup, as good as this one looks, and yours are only plastic, there's one waiting for you in heaven at a table where he's going to sit with you and have that fourth cup. And I have a feeling that has no bottom to it, somehow. That's the cup of the kingdom, which we don't drink now. Is it worth not drinking now and waiting till later? That's what faith does. It waits on God's promises. And this is how we end our Seder, except for one story. I tell this story because I think it's a real important one. If I could find it. Maybe I will. It's a story, and if you've been to any of my Seders, you know this story. But I love this story because it's a story that could have happened, have a different ending. So, but this Seder, which is practiced all over the world by Jewish people, it saddens me that they leave the table full of good food and wine and maybe a good time at the table, sometimes not. But nevertheless, it's an emptiness you leave with. And that doesn't have to be. Do you know the Jews have a calling, which we talked about? Did you know the calling that Gentiles have that's specific for the Gentiles? Does anybody want to say what it is? What's that? Jealousy. What are you talking about, jealousy? You're supposed to be jealous? Amen. Is that familiar to you? Did you know that? That the role of the Gentiles, I'm not going to tell you where it's located. You'll say, oh, that's in the book of Zephaniah or something. No, it's in the New Testament. You got to look for it. Because it says specifically, the role of the Gentiles is to provoke the Jews to jealousy. Like Laura Leah said. What do you mean jealousy? A jealous person wants what you have because it thinks it should be mine. The Jews want to want what you have, not despise what you have. They want to be attracted to what you have. They don't want to feel like you have to convert them in order to be their friend. That's why you're befriending them. That's what they think. You know why they think that? Because it happened for 2,000 years. That's all they know. All I knew about Jesus, I told you before, was that our people killed him. That wasn't a Jesus I wanted to meet. I thought if he met me, he's going to blame me for it. And I wanted nothing to do with him. So I went as far away as I could from Jesus. I missed a lot of life because of that. And if it wasn't for God's own personal visit, I don't know, I could have waited a lot longer before I knew about Jesus, but he met me on my kitchen floor. No one ever shared Jesus with me before that. So this is a story of Miriam. She was a Hebrew girl who, by some traditions, at least mine, she lived in Egypt as a slave girl until the very first night of Passover. Miriam was about 9 years old, and she was told to go to bed after their hurried meal. She lay down, but she couldn't sleep, so she came outside where her father was busy preparing to leave, for the family to leave. Miriam, he said, you should be sleeping. Tomorrow is a big day for us, like none ever before. Now go back to bed and sleep. So she returned to her bed, but all she could do was toss and turn. So she called to him, Abba, Abba, I need you. So her father ran back inside, and he saw her troubled face. He said, what's wrong, sweetheart? He asked her. I can't sleep, she told him. I'm afraid you will forget to put the lamb's blood on the doorposts. Her father smiled. He stroked the hair from her forehead and assured her that he would not forget. Then he tucked her back under her covers. And again she cried out. Because she couldn't keep her eyes closed, no matter how hard she squeezed them. Abba, Abba, she shouted, come quickly. Her father dropped the bag he was loading on their cart and ran back into the house, and this time she was crying. Miriam, why are you so troubled? Abba, she sobbed, I am your firstborn child. If you don't put the blood on the doorpost and the lintel, I will die. So he picked her up off the bed, and he wrapped his arms around her and says, come with me, Miriam. I will show you. And then you can go back to sleep. So he carried her outside. But as soon as he turned her around to face the door, his smile turned into utter shock. Next to the door was the basin with the hyssop branch inside it, but there was no blood applied to the doorposts or the lintel. He quickly put her down and picked up the hyssop and began to brush the blood on the lintel and the doorposts. And just as he put the branch down, he heard sounds of screams in the distance from the land of the Egyptians as the sky grew dark. Only then did he safely carry his daughter back to bed, where she soon lay down and slept. So the Passover meal is a study of 3 nights. The first night was in Egypt, the second night was in Jerusalem, and this third one is in West Palm Beach. Yeah, that's it. The first one became history because they were so incredible. But this one could become just as incredible for you if it becomes personal, like the Seder's intended to be. It must be personal in order for you to fully experience it. Jesus asked his disciples one more thing in the Garden of Gethsemane. He asked them to wait and watch for him, with him, for 1 hour. Do you know why? It was also a commandment. In the same night of the Passover, God gave them this commandment. In Exodus 12, it was a night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So this same night is a night of watching kept to the Lord by all the people of Israel throughout their generations. It's for all of us. We as adults need to keep watch over the culture that we live in for the sake of our children and our children's children. It's no longer about ourselves. You get to realize that after a while, don't you? In fact, we need to be watchmen for all children. We cannot take for granted that there's Miriams out there that feel safe anymore. If we don't get close enough to each other's cries, we're not going to hear them. Jesus assured us when his blood was applied to the doorpost of eternity that we and our household will be saved. And not only saved, Jesus added to that we'd be filled with hope and purpose so that we could join him in his rescue mission in this day that we lived. And as we do, we could bank on the promise of his return, like he said, and the opportunity to sit with him at his table whenever we're hungry, whenever we thirst. So one last thing about this is that, interesting enough, in modern Hebrew, the word watchman is applied to Christians, Gentile Christians. And they don't know why. Why did they pick that word? It's called notzrim. It means watchman. It's only used one time. And it's used in the same chapter, chapter 31 of the New Covenant. So you got some homework. Don't do it tonight. But as the future unfolds, get back to this book. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir, and I'm not preaching. I hope you don't think that. But you're an exceptional group. And I say that from experience. I can't remember when we did our first Seder, but I've done a lot that have fell flat. And people are like, are you kidding me? Aren't you done yet? But you're not like that. I know some of you are half asleep even, but you're trying to stay awake. But guess what? It's time to dance. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We need to move the tables, correct? So we're going to empty the tables and move them in order. Ash.